My daughter called me in the middle of the storm with a trembling voice. "Mom, I'm so cold. Save me. Save my baby." He left me at a bus stop. The pain is unbearable. A loud scream erupted on the line. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. The storm came in from the Gulf like a bruised and angry god, the sky over Houston darkening from a hazy summer blue to a shade of deep violent purple in less than an hour. I sat in the armchair in my living room, a cup of chamomile tea in my hand, and watched the wind begin to whip the heavy heads of the magnolia trees in my front yard. For 30 years as a 911 dispatcher, the sound of an approaching storm was a professional signal, a prelude to a long night of panicked calls about downed power lines and flooded underpasses. Tonight, in the first year of my retirement, it was just weather, a thing to be watched from the safe, quiet harbor of my home. My name is Brenda Jackson, and for most of my life I was the calm, steady voice in the storm. I was the person you got when you called on the worst day of your life. I've listened to men describe their own heart attacks. I've coached mothers through delivering their own babies. I've heard the final, terrified breaths of people whose stories I will carry with me to my grave. My job was to take chaos and distill it into information, to turn panic into a plan. I was good at it. I had a gift for staying calm when the world was on fire. The only thing that had ever truly been able to rattle that professional composure was my daughter, Chloe. She was 24, a brilliant graphic designer with a heart as big and as bright as a Texas sunrise. She was also, I had to admit, a little naive. She saw the world not as it was, a place of sharp edges and hidden dangers, but as she wished it to be, and the center of her beautiful wished-for world was Michael Sterling. Michael. He was a force of nature in his own right, a whirlwind of charisma and dazzling smiles. He worked in sales, some high-pressure commission-based job selling software, and he was breathtakingly good at it. He could sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. As the old saying goes, he had swept my daughter off her feet, and she had fallen hard and fast. I, with my dispatcher's finely honed instincts for the subtle tells of a liar, had never fully trusted him. His charm was a little too polished, his stories of success a little too grand, his expensive car a little too flashy for a 26-year-old on a commission-only salary. There was a desperation just beneath his confident surface, a frantic paddling energy under the calm glide of the swan. But Chloe was in love. Deeply, blindly, and as of 8 months ago, pregnantly. She was carrying my first grandchild, a little boy, and the thought of him was the one true, uncomplicated joy in my quiet, retired life. For her sake, for the sake of the family she was so determined to build, I had tried to silence the skeptical dispatcher in my head. I had tried to just be a mother, a supportive and trusting one. The first fat drops of rain began to spatter against the window panes. The wind was a low, mournful moan in the eaves. I took a sip of my tea and looked at the clock. It was almost 9. Chloe and Michael were supposed to be on their way to her final prenatal class. They had been arguing earlier. I knew because she had called me, her voice a tight wire of frustration. It was the usual argument, money. Michael's commission checks had been delayed, and the rent on their trendy Montrose apartment was late again. I had offered to help as I always did. She, her pride a fierce stubborn thing, had refused, as she always did. "We'll handle it, Mom," she'd said. "Michael has a plan." The thought of Michael's plans sent a familiar cold shiver of unease down my spine. The storm outside was growing louder, the rain now a furious driving sheet against the glass. I hoped they were safe. I hoped they had decided to stay home. I hoped my brilliant, beautiful, and deeply naive daughter was all right. My dispatcher's gut, the one that had been silent for a year, was beginning to wake up, and it was telling me that this was not a night for peace. This was a night for incoming calls. The relationship between my daughter and me was a landscape of deep, foundational love, with a few difficult patches of terrain. The primary point of friction, the one we navigated with a careful and often frustrating dance, was Michael. I had tried to like him. For Chloe's sake, I had tried with every fiber of my being. I had invited them to Sunday dinners. I had listened with a polite maternal smile to his long grandiose stories about the multi-million-dollar deals he was about to close. I had complimented his flashy, expensive watch, a timepiece I knew with a quiet, sickening certainty that he could not possibly afford. But the dispatcher in me, the human lie detector, could not be silenced. I saw the small, almost imperceptible tells. the way his eyes would dart away when I asked a specific detailed question about his finances, the slight nervous tremor in his hand as he reached for his wine glass, the way his charm was a little too bright, a little too hot, the way a fire burns when it's fueled by something flammable and fast. Chloe, of course, saw none of this. She saw only the man she loved, the charismatic, ambitious partner who was, she was convinced, on the verge of greatness. My gentle, probing questions, my quiet words of caution were not seen as the concern of a loving and professionally trained mother. They were seen as criticism, as a lack of faith in her judgment. "You just don't like him, Mom," she had said to me a few months ago, her voice full of a hurt and a defiance that had broken my heart. "You think he's not good enough for me, just because he's not some quiet, boring 9-to-5 guy like Dad was. That's not it, baby." I had tried to explain, my voice gentle. "Your father was a good, steady man, a man of his word. I worry, Chloe. Michael's world seems to be built on a foundation of maybes, of deals that are about to happen. A real life needs a foundation that is solid." "You're not being fair," she had shot back, her eyes flashing. "You're a pessimist. It's your job. You've spent 30 years listening to the worst of the world. You've forgotten how to see the good. Michael is a dreamer. He dreams big, and I would rather spend my life with a man who is reaching for the stars, even if he sometimes stumbles, than with a man who is content to just stare at the ground." The conversation had ended there, a quiet, painful impasse. She saw his recklessness as vision. I saw it as a 5-alarm fire in the making. And the pregnancy had only amplified the tension, the impending reality of a child, of the profound and non-negotiable responsibilities of fatherhood seemed to have sent Michael into a new, more frantic spiral of desperation. The stories of his big deals became more grandiose, the excuses for his lack of actual tangible income more elaborate. And my daughter, my fiercely loyal and deeply in love daughter, had become his primary defender, his shield against the harsh, pragmatic realities of the world. She had taken a part-time job, working from home on her graphic design projects, trying to bridge the ever-widening gap between their expenses and their income. She was 8 months pregnant, and she was the one carrying the financial as well as the physical weight of their new family. The storm outside was a perfect, terrible metaphor for the storm that had been brewing in their lives. And I was sitting here in my quiet, safe and dry house, feeling the profound and deeply frustrating impotence of a mother, who can see the lightning but cannot stop the strike. The phone rang at precisely 9:47 p.m. The sound was a shrill, violent intrusion into the quiet of my house. A sound that cut through the roar of the wind and the rain. I knew before I even looked at the caller ID who it was. The dispatcher's gut, the one that had been dormant for a year, was now wide awake and it was screaming. I snatched the phone from the end table. The screen glowed with her name, Chloe. "Hello?" I said, my voice already the calm, steady and professional instrument of 1,000 other crisis calls. The sound that came back was not my daughter's voice. It was the sound of the storm, a chaotic roar of wind and lashing rain, and beneath it a small, weak and terrified sound, the sound of a wounded animal, a sob. "Chloe?" I said again, my voice sharper now, the calm beginning to crack. "Chloe, baby, is that you? Where are you? What's wrong?" "Mom," her voice, a thin, trembling and utterly broken thread in the chaos. "Mom, I'm so cold." The dispatcher in me took over. My mind became a checklist. Who, what, where, when. "Okay, honey," I said, my voice a thing of pure focused calm. "I need you to tell me where you are. Can you see a street sign, a landmark?" "A bus stop," she sobbed, her teeth chattering so hard I could hear it through the phone. On Richmond Avenue. I think, the one near the old theater." Richmond Avenue. In the middle of this storm, it was a low-lying area, prone to flash flooding. My mind was a map of the city, and the location she had just given me was a known danger zone. "Okay, Chloe," I said, my own heart now a frantic hammering drum against my ribs, but my voice remained a steady, reassuring metronome. "Okay, I know where that is. Now tell me what happened. Where is Michael?" The sob that came back was a sound of such profound, abject and utter despair that it seemed to be torn from the very center of her soul. "He's gone, Mom," she wept. He left me." "Left you?" I repeated, my mind refusing to process the words. "What do you mean, he left you?" "We were arguing," she said, her words a frantic, tumbling rush. "About the rent, about the baby. He just started screaming that he couldn't do it. that it was too much pressure. He pulled the car over. He told me to get out. The sheer monstrous cruelty of it was a physical blow. To abandon a woman, an 8 months pregnant woman, on a deserted street corner in the middle of a hurricane, it was an act of such profound and such cowardly evil, that my mind could not fully grasp it. And then the pain started, she cried, her voice rising in a new sharp and terrifying pitch of pure physical agony. Mom, the pain? It's so bad. It's not right. It's too early. Mom, save me. Save my baby. My blood ran cold. The pain. The baby. It was not just an abandonment. It was a medical emergency. A high-risk premature labor, happening in the middle of a flash flood. Okay, baby, I said, my voice now a sharp, commanding thing. I was no longer a mother. I was a dispatcher, and this was the most important call of my life. I need you to listen to me. I have already called 911. The paramedics are on their way. I am on my way, but I need you to stay on the line with me. I need you to keep talking to me. Can you do that? He left me at a bus stop. She sobbed, her voice now a mantra of pure heartbroken disbelief. The pain is unbearable. And then, her voice was drowned out by a new sound. A sound that will be seared into my memory for the rest of my life. A sound that was a mixture of pure animal agony and sheer abject terror. A loud, long and piercing scream erupted on the line. And then, silence. The scream, followed by the sudden terrible silence, did not make me panic. It did the opposite. It was a switch, a trigger. The terrified mother, the one who had been on the verge of collapsing into a puddle of her own fear, was gone. In her place, the 911 dispatcher, the woman who had spent 30 years being the calm in the center of the storm, took absolute and total control. My mind became a quiet, orderly, and deeply efficient machine. My body moved with a purpose that was born of 1,000 other crisis situations. Chloe, I said into the phone, my voice a sharp, clear and commanding bark. Chloe, can you hear me? Stay on the line, I am still here. There was no response, only the sound of the wind and the rain, and a new more terrifying sound, a low pained and deeply animalistic moan. My fingers were already flying across the keypad of my home's landline, the one I kept for just such emergencies. I was dialing 911 with one hand, my cell phone still pressed to my ear with the other. The call was answered on the first ring. Houston 911, what is your emergency? The voice on the other end was a young woman, her tone calm and professional. I knew that voice. I had trained her. This is retired dispatcher Brenda Jackson, badge number 722. I said, my own voice a thing of pure cold and utter authority. I am on the line with a 24-year-old female, 8 months pregnant, who is in active premature labor. She has been abandoned by her partner at a bus stop on Richmond Avenue, near the old River Oaks Theater. I need a bus and a patrol car at that location, lights and siren, top priority. Now, there was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Brenda? The young dispatcher Maria said, her professional calm cracking for a fraction of a second. That's right, Maria, I said, my voice a blade of ice. And the woman on the line is my daughter, so you will dispatch that bus and you will do it 5 minutes ago. Yes, ma'am, she said, the professionalism snapping back into place, but now laced with a new personal urgency. I could hear the frantic rhythmic clicking of her keyboard in the background. Bus 27, car 14, priority 1, Richmond and Shepherd. I'm on it, Brenda. Good, I said. Now I need you to do one more thing for me. I need you to get me a direct patch to the responding paramedic unit's radio, on my cell, and I need you to find me the personal cell phone number for a Michael Sterling. He's the one who left her there. I want a bolo out on his vehicle, a gray late-model BMW sedan, license plate. I don't have it, but he has a vanity plate. It says Sales God. You can't miss it. The sheer ugly arrogance of that license plate, a thing I had always despised, was now a beautiful, perfect and deeply damning piece of identifying information. You got it, Brenda, Maria said, her voice a low, focused hum of pure efficiency. I was already moving. I was out of my armchair, my own car keys in my hand. I was slipping on a pair of rain boots I kept by the door. I was grabbing a handful of clean dry towels from the linen closet. My mind was a checklist of emergency protocols. Through the phone I could still hear my daughter's low-pained moans. It's okay, baby, I said into the phone, My voice once again the soothing maternal instrument she needed to hear. Help is coming, and Mama is coming. You just have to hold on, you just have to breathe. Can you do that for me, Chloe? Can you breathe? I was out the door and in my car, the engine roaring to life, the windshield wipers already fighting a losing battle against the torrential driving rain. I was a dispatcher on the most important call of her life. And I was a mother on her way to war. The drive through the storm-ravaged streets of Houston was a descent into a special kind of hell. The world outside my windshield was a chaotic impressionistic nightmare of wind, water and darkness. The rain was coming down in solid, blinding sheets. The wind so strong it was making my heavy old sedan shudder and sway. Tree branches and debris littered the roads. The traffic lights at a major intersection were out, creating a snarl of panicked honking cars. But I was not a civilian driver. I was a dispatcher. And my mind was a map of the city's arteries, its blockages, its secret hidden pathways. I knew which streets would flood first, which underpasses would be impassable. I navigated the treacherous waterlogged streets, not with panic, but with a cold, calculated, and deeply informed precision. I was not driving. I was responding. Maria, my angel at the 911 dispatch center, had patched me through to the paramedic unit. As promised, their calm professional voices were now a second soundtrack in my ear, a counterpoint to the chaotic roar of the storm, and my daughter's pained, ragged breathing. Dispatch, this is bus 27. A man's voice, calm and steady, crackled over the line. We're on Richmond, approaching Shepherd. Visibility is near zero. The street is already flooding. Bus 27, be advised. Maria's voice replied. The patient's mother is on the line with her. She is also en route to your location. A private vehicle. 10-4, dispatch. The paramedic said. Tell the mother to be careful. This is no night to be out. It's okay, Chloe, I said into my own phone, my voice a steady reassuring anchor in her sea of pain. They're almost there, baby. Can you see their lights yet? The pain, Mom, she sobbed, her voice a thin, reedy thing. It's getting worse. It's coming in waves. Contractions. The dispatcher in me registered the information with a cold, clinical dread. This was not just premature labor, this was active, advanced, and very, very dangerous labor. I need you to breathe with me, Chloe, I commanded, my voice the calm, authoritative instrument of a lamaze coach. In through your nose, out through your mouth, a long, slow breath. Like this. Ho! Ho! I breathed with her, my own lungs a bellows, trying to force a rhythm, a sense of order into the chaos of her body's betrayal. The city, my city, was a hostile, alien landscape. I saw a car stalled in a foot of murky brown water, its hazard lights a pathetic blinking plea for help. I saw a massive oak branch, as thick as a man's body, lying across a side street, completely blocking it. But I just kept going, my old heavy sedan a determined, unstoppable beast, my hands steady on the wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. And all the while, my mind was working on a second, colder and far more vengeful track. Michael, the sales god, the man who had done this, the man who had left my daughter, his pregnant girlfriend, the mother of his child, to potentially die on a street corner in a hurricane. The dispatcher in me was focused on the rescue, but the mother in me, the primal, protective and deeply, deeply furious mother, was focused on the reckoning. And I knew, with a certainty that was as absolute and as powerful as the storm itself, that his judgment was coming, and I would be the one to deliver it. I saw the flashing lights first, a chaotic strobing galaxy of red and blue, cutting through the thick, driving sheets of rain. The ambulance and the patrol car were parked at a crazy angle on the flooded street, their headlights illuminating a scene of pure, desperate urgency, and in the center of it all, huddled in the small, flimsy shelter of the bus stop, was my daughter. I pulled my car onto the sidewalk, ignoring the wail of my own car alarm as the water lapped at its undercarriage, and I was out the door before the engine was even off. I ran, my rain boots splashing through the ankle-deep, murky water towards the lights, towards her. The scene was even worse than I had imagined. 2 paramedics were already with Chloe, working with a swift professional urgency. She was lying on the cold, wet bench of the bus stop, a thin silver thermal blanket over her, her body racked with the violent shuddering tremors of a contraction. Her face, illuminated by the harsh strobing lights, was a pale, sweaty mask of pure animal agony. I'm her mother, I said, my voice a sharp, authoritative bark that cut through the noise of the storm. One of the paramedics, a young man with a kind, serious face, looked up at me. Mom, You need to stay back. We've got this. The hell I will, I said, pushing past him to get to her side. I'm a retired 911 dispatcher. I was on the phone with her. What's her status? The young man, recognizing a fellow professional in the chaos, immediately shifted his tone. Contractions are 2 minutes apart, he said, his voice a quick, efficient report. Her water has broken. We're seeing some crowning. This baby is not waiting to get to the hospital. We're going to have to deliver it here. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Here, in this cold, wet and filthy bus stop in the middle of a hurricane. I knelt down beside my daughter, my own fear a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I took her hand. It was icy cold, her grip a thing of desperate, bone-crushing strength. Chloe, baby, I said, my voice a low, steady murmur. I'm here. Mama's here. You're going to be okay. She opened her eyes and they were wide with a mixture of terror and a profound, drug-like exhaustion. He left me, she whispered, her voice a raw, broken thing. He left me. I know, baby, I said, my own voice thick with a rage so profound it was almost a physical taste. We'll deal with him later. Right now, you have a job to do. You have to be strong. You have to push for your baby. The next 20 minutes were a blur of organized, professional chaos in the midst of the storm's natural, violent chaos. The two paramedics were a miracle of calm efficiency. They turned the filthy, windswept bus stop into a makeshift delivery room. The police officer, a young, stoic woman, helped to hold up a tarp, creating a flimsy but necessary barrier against the driving rain. And I became my daughter's anchor. I held her hand. I wiped her brow. I breathed with her through the crushing tidal waves of the contractions. I was her mother. It was the only job that mattered. And then at 10:37 p.m. in the middle of a flash flood, to the soundtrack of a raging hurricane and the distant wail of city sirens, my grandson was born. He came into the world with a loud, furious and deeply, deeply beautiful cry. A defiant declaration of life in the face of his father's cowardly retreat. The paramedic wrapped him in a clean, dry blanket and placed him on Chloe's chest, and my daughter, my beautiful, brave daughter, looked down at the small, perfect and deeply wrinkled face of her son, and she began to cry. Not the tears of pain or of fear, but the quiet, overwhelmed and profoundly loving tears of a new mother. And in that moment, in the midst of all the chaos and the wreckage, there was only one thing in the world, and it was perfect. The ride to the hospital was a noisy, jarring and deeply surreal journey. I sat in the back of the ambulance, crammed between a wall of medical equipment and the gurney where my daughter lay. My tiny, perfect grandson now safely ensconced in a portable incubator. The storm still raged outside, but inside this small, brightly lit box a new, more peaceful reality was taking hold. Chloe was exhausted, pale, but her eyes, every time they flickered to the small, sleeping form of her son, were shining with a new, fierce and deeply primal love. She had been through a war and she had won. We arrived at the hospital, a chaotic ballet of paramedics, nurses and doctors. They were whisked away to the maternity ward, a team of professionals descending upon them with a calm, efficient urgency, and I was left. Suddenly, in the bright, sterile, and deeply impersonal waiting room of the emergency department, the adrenaline that had been fueling me for the past 2 hours began to recede, and in its place, a profound, bone-deep exhaustion settled over me. I sank into one of the hard plastic waiting room chairs. The sounds of the ER, the beeping of monitors, the quiet, urgent murmur of doctors, the distant sob of another family's crisis, a familiar and strangely comforting soundtrack. I had done it. I had gotten them here. They were safe. The dispatcher's job was over. And now, the mother's job was about to begin. My mind, which had been so focused on the immediate life-or-death logistics of the rescue, now began to process the full, ugly scope of the betrayal. Michael, the man who should have been here, holding his son, his hand on his girlfriend's brow, was where? I took out my phone. It was still buzzing with texts from Maria, my angel at the 911 dispatch. I scrolled through them. Bolo is out on the BMW, Brenda. Every patrol car in the city is looking for him. We got a ping on his cell phone. It's showing him in a hotel near the Galleria. The Omni, the patrol car at the bus stop, found Chloe's purse. It's on its way to you at the hospital. The Omni, a fancy, 4-star hotel. While my daughter was giving birth on a cold, wet bus stop bench in the middle of a hurricane, he had checked himself into a luxury hotel. The sheer, breathtaking selfishness of it was a thing of almost clinical purity. A young, kind-faced nurse came out to find me. "Miss Jackson," she said. Your daughter and your grandson are settled in. They're both doing remarkably well, all things considered. The baby is small, but he's a fighter. You can go up and see them now." I thanked her, my voice thick with a gratitude so profound it was almost a sob. I stood up, my own body aching with a sympathetic exhaustion, and I made my way to the elevators. I found them in a quiet, private room on the maternity ward. The storm outside was still a distant, muffled roar, but in here there was only a profound and beautiful peace. Chloe was propped up on pillows, her face scrubbed clean of the dirt and the tears, her eyes shining with a soft, tired and deeply radiant light. And nestled in her arms, sleeping peacefully, was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. My grandson, he was so small, so perfect. His tiny, wrinkled face, a perfect miniature version of my own late husband's. I stood in the doorway for a long time just watching them, my heart a painful swelling thing in my chest. This was the love. This was the beauty. This was the thing worth fighting for, and I knew, with a certainty that was as absolute and as powerful as my own heartbeat, that I would spend the rest of my life protecting this small, perfect and deeply vulnerable new family from the man who had so callously and so cowardly tried to abandon it. The reckoning was not over. It had only just begun. For the first 12 hours of his son's life, Michael Sterling was a ghost. His phone went straight to voicemail. He did not reply to the single neutral text I had sent him from the hospital. "Chloe is fine. Your son was born at 10:37 p.m. They are both at Memorial Hermann." I spent the night in the uncomfortable recliner in Chloe's hospital room, my own needs a distant, irrelevant second to hers. I watched her sleep, her face in repose, looking as young and as vulnerable as it had when she was a little girl. I watched my grandson sleep in his small plastic bassinet, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, miraculous rhythm, and I thought about the man who was missing. What kind of man runs away from this? What kind of man chooses a hotel room over the birth of his own child? The dispatcher in me tried to analyze it, to find a logical reason. Fear, panic, a profound, catastrophic and deeply cowardly psychological break, but the mother in me, the grandmother in me, could find no reason, no excuse, that could ever justify this monstrous act of abandonment. He finally surfaced around noon the next day. He didn't call, he just appeared. He walked into the quiet, sunlit hospital room, and his presence was a jarring, discordant note in the peaceful symphony of new motherhood. He was not the charismatic, confident sales god I was used to seeing. He was a wreck. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie was askew, and his eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, as if he had spent the night in his own private hell. He looked like a man who had just survived a plane crash, which, in a way he had, the crash of his own making. He stood in the doorway, his gaze fixed on Chloe, who was holding the baby, her face a mask of cold quiet and utterly unforgiving fury. "Chloe," he whispered, his voice a raw, broken thing. I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. I panicked." "You panicked," she repeated, her voice not the loud, hysterical sound of a woman wronged, but something far more terrifying, a quiet, dead and utterly emotionless monotone. "You panicked. So you threw your 8 months pregnant girlfriend out of your car in the middle of a hurricane and left her to die. That was your solution." He flinched as if she had struck him. He looked from her cold, hard face to the small sleeping bundle in her arms. He looked at his son for the very first time, and his face, his handsome, ruined face, crumpled. A low, guttural sob, the sound of a man's entire world collapsing in on him, was torn from his throat. He took another step, his hand outstretched as if to touch the baby. He's beautiful," he wept. "Don't you touch him," Chloe hissed, her voice a low, venomous thing. She instinctively pulled the baby closer to her, shielding him with her own body. "You lost that right. You lost all your rights, last night on that street corner." He stood there, a broken, weeping man, a pathetic, exiled king at the gates of his own kingdom. And in that moment, I saw the path forward. I saw the shape of the reckoning to come. It would not be a thing of my making. I did not have to be the avenging angel. My daughter, my sweet, naive, and deeply in love daughter, had been transformed by the fire of his betrayal. She was no longer a girl, she was a mother, and she was a warrior, and she was about to wage a war of her own. She refused to see Michael, she refused to take his calls, she allowed him one brief, supervised visit with the baby at the hospital, during which she had sat in a chair in the corner of the room, her arms crossed, her eyes like chips of ice, while I stood guard. The proud new father was reduced to a visitor, a stranger, granted a brief audience with the son he had abandoned. When it was time for us to leave the hospital, I was the one who drove them home. Not to the trendy, and now deeply tainted apartment in Montrose, but to my house, to the sanctuary. I had already, with a quiet, efficient fury, arranged for a moving company to pack up all of Chloe and Noah's things. Her life with Michael was over. It was a closed chapter, an archived file. Michael, of course, was in a state of frantic, panicked despair. He was bombarding my phone, Chloe's phone, the phones of all our friends, with a relentless barrage of tearful pleading and deeply pathetic messages. He was sending flowers, gifts, long rambling letters of apology. Chloe read none of them. She instructed me to throw the flowers in the trash, to return the gifts to the sender. She was not interested in his apologies. She was interested in one thing, and one thing only: justice. "I want to ruin him, Mom," she said to me one evening, as we sat in my quiet living room, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. Her voice was not the voice of a heartbroken girl. It was the calm, cold, and deeply strategic voice of a general planning a campaign. "I don't just want to leave him, I want to make sure that he can never ever do this to another woman again. I want to destroy the one thing he loves more than anything in the world. His reputation, his sales god persona." "What are you thinking, baby?" I asked, my own heart a mixture of a fierce, proud love for this new, strong woman she had become, and a quiet, professional admiration for her strategic mind. "He's a con man, Mom," she said, her voice a flat, factual thing. "A charming, brilliant, and deeply effective con man. His entire career is built on a foundation of lies, of promises he can't keep, of a projected success that is a complete and utter fiction. And I have all the receipts." For the next 2 days she did not rest. She sat at my dining room table, her laptop open, the baby sleeping in a bassinet at her feet, and she began to build her case. She had years of his emails, of his text messages, of his fraudulent financial reports he had sent to his clients. She had the bank statements, showing the vast, terrifying gap between the life he was living and the income he was actually earning. She had the names, the dates, the numbers. She was not just a jilted lover. She was a whistleblower. And she was about to bring the entire glittering and deeply fraudulent world of Michael Sterling crashing down around his ears. It was a beautiful and terrifying thing to watch. Michael Sterling's kingdom was a castle built on sand. His success was an illusion, a brilliant and deeply fragile piece of stagecraft. He worked for a high-end software company, selling complex multi-million-dollar logistical systems to large corporations. He was by all accounts a gifted salesman. His charisma was a superpower. He could charm a board of skeptical old-money CEOs into signing a deal they didn't need, with a smile and a story. But his income was 100% commission-based. And the sales cycle for his kind of product was long and unpredictable. There were good months where a single massive commission check would flood their bank account, and there were long, dry, and terrifyingly lean months where there was nothing at all. A sensible man would have budgeted for this ebb and flow. A sensible man would have built a life based on his average, not his peak, earnings. Michael was not a sensible man. He was a man who was addicted to the performance of success. He lived his life as if every month were a good month. He leased the expensive BMW. He rented the trendy apartment. He wore the designer suits, all to maintain the image of the sales god, the man who was too successful to fail. And he funded this illusion with a quiet and deeply fraudulent Ponzi scheme of his own making. He would use the promise of a future not yet closed deal to borrow money from one client to pay off the debts he owed to another. He was a master of the stall, of the charm offensive, of the check is in the mail school of financial management. And Chloe, my daughter, had been his silent and for a long time his unwitting accomplice. She had been the beautiful, successful graphic designer on his arm, the other half of the perfect power couple, her presence a validation of his own fraudulent success. And now she was about to become the star witness for the prosecution. She spent 3 days in a state of cold, focused fury, her fingers flying across the keyboard of her laptop. She was not just a heartbroken woman, she was an archivist, a historian of her own betrayal. She compiled a dossier, a thick, damning, and meticulously organized file that detailed the full, ugly scope of Michael's financial deceptions. She had the emails where he had promised one client that a massive return on their investment was just around the corner, while at the same time he was using their initial investment to pay for the lease on his BMW. She had the text messages where he had lied to another client about a system glitch that was delaying their payment, when in reality the money had already been spent on the rent for their apartment. She had created a timeline, a flowchart of his lies, a beautiful and deeply damning piece of information design that showed with a crystal-clear graphic precision how he had been robbing Peter to pay Paul for the past 3 years. When she was finished, she had a document that was not just a story of a bad boyfriend, but a detailed evidence-based report on a pattern of systematic professional fraud. "What are you going to do with this?" I asked her, my voice a quiet, awestruck whisper as I looked at the file on her computer screen. She looked up at me, her eyes clear, cold, and utterly determined. "I'm going to send it to the one person he is more afraid of than anyone else in the world," she said. "His boss, the CEO of his company. And I am going to make sure that the sales god never works in this town again." The CEO of Michael's company was a woman named Elizabeth Reed, a legendary and notoriously tough figure in the tech world. She was a self-made billionaire, a woman who had built her empire on a foundation of ruthless efficiency and an absolute, non-negotiable demand for integrity. She was, in other words, the last person in the world you wanted to find out you had a con man working on your sales team. Chloe crafted the email with the precision of a surgeon. The subject line was a simple and deeply professional. "Regarding the conduct of your employee, Mr. Michael Sterling." The body of the email was not an emotional, rambling screed. It was a calm, factual, and utterly devastating summary of her findings. She did not introduce herself as his scorned, abandoned, and now single mother of his child ex-girlfriend. She introduced herself as a concerned private citizen who has recently come into possession of some deeply troubling financial documents. She laid out the case, point by methodical point. She attached the timeline, the flowchart, the redacted bank statements, the incriminating emails and text messages. She built an ironclad and deeply undeniable case for professional malfeasance and potential criminal fraud. She ended the email with a single quiet and deeply powerful sentence. "I am not seeking any personal or financial remuneration in this matter. I am simply providing you with this information as I believe it is a significant liability to your company's reputation and financial health. I trust you will handle it with the discretion and seriousness it deserves." She signed it simply, "A concerned party." She hit send at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. The email, I knew, would land in Elizabeth Reed's inbox like a small, perfectly targeted and deeply explosive missile. And then we waited. For the next 24 hours the silence was a tense, expectant thing. Michael, who had been bombarding us with a relentless stream of pathetic pleading calls and texts, had suddenly gone quiet. The storm of his emotional fallout had been replaced by a new, and I was sure far more terrifying silence. The call came the next afternoon. It was from a number Chloe didn't recognize, a private, unlisted number. She answered it, her own voice calm and steady, and put it on speakerphone for me to hear. "Is this Chloe Jackson?" A woman's voice, a voice of pure cold and unmistakable power, asked. "This is she," Chloe replied. "This is Elizabeth Reed," the voice said. "I am the CEO of Omnicorp. I received your email. I have reviewed the documents you sent, and I have just concluded a meeting with Mr. Sterling." She paused, and the silence seemed to crackle with a cold, corporate electricity. "I am calling to inform you," Elizabeth Reed continued, her voice a flat, unemotional instrument of corporate justice, "that as of 5 minutes ago Mr. Sterling is no longer an employee of this company. We are also launching a full internal forensic audit of his accounts, and we will be turning over our findings to the district attorney's office. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We have no further comment at this time." And then, the line went dead. Chloe and I just looked at each other. Across my quiet kitchen table, the sales god had been fired. His kingdom, the castle of lies he had built, had just been demolished in a single 30-second phone call. The reckoning had been swift. It had been brutal, and it had been complete. The final pathetic implosion of Michael Sterling's life was not a thing we witnessed firsthand, but we heard the echoes of it from afar. The news of his sudden, shocking firing and the subsequent forensic audit of his accounts sent a shockwave through the high-pressure, high-gossip world of corporate sales in Houston. The sales god had fallen, and he had fallen hard. His clients, the ones he had been so masterfully conning for so long, began to talk to each other. The stories of his delayed commission checks, his system glitches, his endless charming excuses, were no longer seen as the quirks of a brilliant but slightly chaotic salesman. They were now seen for what they were, a pattern of deliberate, systematic fraud. Lawsuits, we heard through the grapevine, were being prepared. His professional life was in ruins. His reputation was a smoking crater, And his personal life he was about to discover was about to get a whole lot worse. He showed up at my house 2 days after he was fired. I saw him on the security camera at my front gate, and my first instinct was to deny him entry, to leave him out on the street in the metaphorical storm he had created. But then I looked at Chloe. She was sitting in the living room, rocking her son, my grandson, her face a mask of calm, quiet strength. "Let him in, Mom," she said, her voice a quiet, steady thing. "He needs to see what he threw away. And I have one last thing I need to say to him." So I buzzed him in. He walked into my house, and he was a different man. The charm was gone. The charisma was gone. The expensive tailored suit was gone, replaced by a wrinkled shirt and a pair of jeans. He was a hollowed-out, broken shell of the man he had once been. He stood in the middle of my living room and he looked at Chloe, at the beautiful, serene woman she had become. And he looked at his son, the small, perfect, sleeping baby in her arms. And his face, his handsome, ruined face, crumpled. "Chloe," he began, his voice a raw, broken whisper. I have lost everything. My job, my reputation, my money. I have nothing left." "No, Michael," Chloe said, her voice not angry, not vengeful, but full of a quiet, sorrowful, and deeply powerful pity. "You are wrong. You had everything. You had a woman who loved you. You had a beautiful, healthy son. You had a family. That was everything. And you just couldn't see it. You were so busy chasing the illusion of success that you threw away the real thing." He just stood there, weeping, a man who had finally and far too late understood the true cost of his own choices. "I just came to say," he sobbed, "that I am sorry. And to ask, if I can see my son." And in that moment my daughter delivered the final and most profound act of her own personal justice. She did not scream at him. She did not rage. She simply looked at him, at this broken, pathetic man, and she gave him the one thing he did not deserve. But the one thing her son did. A chance. "You will not see him today, Michael," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "And you will not see him tomorrow. You will go and you will fix your own broken life. You will find a real job. You will pay back the people you have wronged. You will find a therapist. You will become a man your son can be proud of. And then, and only then, you may come back here and ask to see him again. The door is not closed forever, Michael, but you and you alone are the one who has to earn the right to walk through it." The years that followed were quiet ones. Michael, to my profound and deep surprise, did what she said. He vanished from our lives, but not from the world. He moved into a small, cheap apartment on the outskirts of the city. He sold his flashy car. He declared bankruptcy, a public and humiliating admission of his own catastrophic failure. And he began the long, slow, and deeply arduous process of rebuilding his life. Not on a foundation of lies, but on a foundation of hard, honest work. He took a job, a humble entry-level position at a small local marketing firm. He was no longer the sales god. He was just a man trying to make a living. He started paying back his debts, one small painful payment at a time, and he went into therapy. Chloe, in turn, built a new life for herself and for her son. She moved out of my house and into her own small, sunny apartment. A place she paid for with the money she earned from her now thriving freelance graphic design business. She was a magnificent mother, a perfect balance of her own loving artistic nature and my own pragmatic no-nonsense strength. And Noah, my grandson, he grew into a happy, boisterous and deeply loved little boy. His world was a safe, stable and deeply predictable one. A world where love was not a transaction, and where dinner was always on the table. Michael did not see his son for 2 years. He did not ask to. He respected the terms of his exile. But he sent letters, not to Chloe but to me, long, rambling and deeply, painfully honest letters, detailing his progress, his struggles, his slow and often faltering journey towards becoming a better man. I read them all to Chloe. We did not discuss them, we just let them be, a quiet, one-sided correspondence. A testament to a man who was, at the very least, trying. The first, tentative meeting took place in a public park, on a bright, sunny Saturday afternoon. Noah was almost 3. I sat on a bench 100 feet away, a silent, watchful guardian, as Chloe and Michael and their son met for the first time as a new and deeply fragile kind of family. It was awkward, it was stilted, but it was a beginning. The years continued to unspool, a quiet, steady rhythm of school plays, scraped knees and birthday parties. The relationship between Chloe and Michael did not magically repair itself. There was no fairy tale reunion. The wound of his betrayal was too deep, the scar too permanent, for a simple, happy ending. But they found a new kind of normal. A relationship built, not on a foundation of romantic illusion, but on a shared and deeply profound love for their son. Michael became a consistent, steady and deeply loving presence in Noah's life. He was not the flashy, fun dad who showed up with expensive gifts. He was the dad who showed up every single weekend to take his son to the park. He was the dad who helped with homework. He was the dad who was, in his own quiet and deeply humbled way, trying to be the man his own father had never been. Chloe, in turn, blossomed. Her graphic design business became a real and very successful enterprise. She was a respected, sought-after artist. She had built a life for herself, a life of her own making, a life of which she was deeply and justifiably proud. She had found a new partner, a kind, steady and deeply decent man, a professor at the local university, who loved her for the strong, resilient woman she was, and who adored her son. I, in turn, settled into the role I had been born to play. I was the grandmother, the matriarch, the quiet, steady and deeply loving center of this new, strange and beautiful family we had all, in our own broken ways, built together. My house was no longer a quiet, lonely place. It was filled once again with the happy, chaotic and deeply wonderful sound of a little boy's laughter. My life, which had been so consumed by the storm of my daughter's crisis, had found a new and deeply peaceful equilibrium. On the 5th anniversary of that terrible storm-tossed night, another hurricane was bearing down on the Gulf Coast. The sky over Houston was a familiar bruised and angry purple. The wind was beginning to howl. I was in my kitchen preparing for the storm, taping the windows, checking my emergency supplies. The phone rang. It was Chloe. "Hey Mom," she said, her voice calm and steady. "The storm looks like it's going to be a bad one. My flight to the conference got cancelled. We're going to ride it out here. Do you want to come over? We can all be together." "I'll be right there, baby," I said, my heart swelling with a quiet, profound love. An hour later we were all gathered in Chloe's cozy, comfortable living room. Me, Chloe, her kind and steady husband, and my grandson Noah, who was now a boisterous, happy and deeply loved 7-year-old. The wind howled outside. The rain lashed against the windows, but inside we were safe. We were together. And then, there was a knock on the door. It was Michael. He was dripping wet, his face etched with a familiar fatherly concern. "The roads are starting to flood," he said. "I wanted to make sure you were all okay, that you had enough batteries." And so we were all there. The 5 of us, a strange, modern and deeply resilient little family, gathered together in the warm, safe light of a living room, while a hurricane raged outside. We played board games. We told stories. We ate sandwiches by candlelight when the power finally went out. And in that moment, in the midst of the storm, I looked at the faces of the people I loved. And I knew, with a certainty that was as absolute and as powerful as the storm itself, that we had survived. We had all survived. The storm passed, as all storms do. The next morning, the world was washed clean, the sky a bright, brilliant and almost impossibly blue. We all went out into the yard to survey the damage. A few fallen branches, a scattering of leaves. The world had held. Noah was chasing a butterfly across the damp grass, his laughter a pure, joyful sound in the clean post-storm air. Chloe and her husband were holding hands, their faces full of a quiet, steady love. And Michael was standing beside me, looking not at the storm's wreckage but at his son. "He's a good kid, Mom," he said, his voice a low, quiet thing. She's done an amazing job with him." "Yes," I said, my own voice full of a quiet pride. "She has." He turned to me then, and his eyes, which had for so long been full of a frantic, desperate ambition, were now just calm. "Thank you, Mom," he said quietly. For everything, for not giving up on me." "I never gave up on you, Michael," I said, and it was the truest thing I had ever said. I gave up on the man you were pretending to be. And I am so glad that I did, because the man you have become, he is a good man, a man your son can be proud of." We stood there for a long time, a mother and her son, not bound by the ugly, toxic secrets of the past, but connected by the quiet, hopeful promise of the future. The storm was over. The damage had been repaired. The foundation was at long last solid, and the quiet that settled over us was not the quiet of loneliness, or of fear. It was the quiet of peace.